Okay, I'm going to call to order the public meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Batavia Public Library District. And Daniel, will you call the roll?
Sure. Blodgett?
Here.
Collada?
Here.
Garrett?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
McKenzie? Russo? Here. Smith?
Here. Thank you, Daniel. So the purpose of this public hearing is to announce an ordinance approving and adopting the annual budget and appropriation for library purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2019. The ordinance is, I'll read the ordinance. Section 1, this is a public hearing on an ordinance approving and adopting the annual budget and appropriation for library purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2010. In accordance with Illinois statutes, the Library District published a legal notice of public hearing on Thursday, June 20th, 2019. This notice was published in the Kane County Chronicle. Section 3, the ordinance in tentative form was available for public inspection for at least 30 days prior to this hearing at the reference desk and the business office of the Batavia Public Library during regular library hours. In Section 4, if there is any person who desires to present testimony to the taxing district represented by this Board of Library Trustees, please step forward at this time. Doesn't appear to be anyone present.
So that's it.
So that's it. And we will adjourn the public hearing at what, 7? Okay, so we'll call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Batavia Public Library District. And if you'd all stand, recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And once again, Daniel, will you call the roll?
Sure. Blodgett?
Here.
Collada?
Here.
Garrett?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
McKenzie? Russo? Here. Smith?
Here. Okay, item number 4, comments from the audience. I don't see anyone giving us any comments. So we'll move on to item 5, to approve the consent agenda. And on the consent agenda this evening are minutes from our regular meeting on June 18th, a closed session on June 18th, a special meeting on July 9th, the expenditures cash disbursement detail report from June of 2019. And then section C, other action items, an ordinance approving and adopting the annual budget and appropriation for library purposes for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2019. So did everyone get a chance to read over the minutes and the amended minutes that George provided for us?
That was my only comment.
Oh, okay. Does anybody want to take anything off of the consent agenda? Okay, then I'll need a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I move to accept it.
Second?
Second.
Kate seconded. And Daniel, this is a roll call vote.
Blodgett?
Aye.
Collada?
Aye.
Garrett?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
McKenzie? Russo? Aye. Smith?
I was waiting. Okay, item 7, we welcome our special guest.
Nope, 6.
Sorry, did I skip? I do that, don't I? Oh, item 6, to approve the agenda. This is a voice vote?
Sure.
But I do need a motion to...
I'll motion to.
I'll second.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Item 7, we will welcome our library attorney, Roger Ritzman, who will be speaking to us this evening. So welcome, Roger.
Well, thank you, thank you. What should we talk about tonight? You know, we could call this, ask your lawyer night on any subject that you want to talk about. I'm going to kick it off with a few comments about Open Meetings Act, because those questions pop up with some frequency. And both George and Joanne told me that, you know, we're looking at allocating maybe 15 to 20 minutes to this, so we can do it shorter, or you know, I can stay as long as you like. So any subject is fair game. You know, so it's a ask your lawyer night, and I'll kick us off with some comments. I put together a very brief outline to just kind of guide my thoughts as much as anything else. We're not going to cover all of this in 15 or 20 minutes. But anyway, I wasn't quite sure when I put this together what subjects were hot topics in your mind. So let me just run through a couple of observations about the Open Meetings Act. One of the questions that pops up frequently is, who can I talk to and when? Okay? With one major exception, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. With one major exception, don't communicate orally or in writing with your trustees, with each other, outside of a public meeting. You're never going to get in any trouble if you don't do that, okay? If you don't communicate orally or in writing with your fellow trustees outside of a public meeting, could be a committee meeting, could be a board meeting, you're never going to get in any trouble. Well, Roger, does that mean that I can't talk to another trustee one-on-one? No, that's the exception. The rules under the Open Meeting Act is that a public meeting which triggers compliance with the Open Meetings Act with posting of an agenda and so forth, and this may be old hat to those of you that have wrestled with Open Meetings Act issues, but a public meeting is a majority of a quorum, and a quorum is 4, a majority of a quorum is 3. So if you have 3 trustees communicating, that's a public meeting. Communicating about library business. 3 trustees can do their fantasy football league if they want to, or talk about Yosemite if they want to. But if you're talking, if 3 trustees are communicating orally or in writing about library business, that's an open meeting, has to be posted, have to have an agenda, have to take minutes, so on and so forth. So 3 is a definite no-no. One-on-one is okay. It's not a violation of the Open Meetings Act, but be very cautious about the method of communication, because if it's in writing, a text, an email, then we may not have an Open Meetings Act issue, but we've got a FOIA issue. Because if that text or email relates to library business and we get a FOIA, then that's a public document. And so if you're going to communicate in some written form, one-on-one, remember 3's out, but one-on-one, that's okay, but understand that that could be produced could be subject to production under FOIA. So if it's going to be in writing, I would use your library email address, not your personal devices. And the reason that's important is because if you're using your personal devices and we get a FOIA request, you may have to produce your personal devices, your cell phone, to a third party to go through there and pick out she loves me not. This one is library business, this one's personal. Most people would not want to have somebody going through there to screen what items are in there. So back to the basic premise, you can do it, you can do it one-on-one. Verbal is better, phone calls okay. But if you're going to do something in writing, be prepared to have that subject to production if you're using your personal devices. So stick with the libraries thing. Again, it has to be, the subject matter of those communications has to be library business. So you can communicate all you want about the sporting event or the weather or whatnot. It's only when it's, but if somebody submits to us a claim, the legal terminology is called a request for review, alleging that we have violated the Open Meetings Act, then there could be an investigation by an entity called the Public Access Counselor, or the PAC, It's a division of the Attorney General's office, and if somebody claims, they send a letter to the Public Access Counselor with the Attorney General's office, say, I think that there was a violation of the Open Meetings Act, or I want all communications between or among trustees relating to library business between January 1 to, July 16, because I think that I want to see what those documents are. We would have an obligation to respond then if the Public Access Counselor says, we want to see all those we want to see all those records, all those public records, which includes text, emails, et cetera, et cetera. So just stay away from, written communications relating to library business, unless you're going to use the library email address. And the beauty of using the library's email address is we only have one place to go when we want to look to see if there were library-related communications.
Roger.
But yeah.
Actually, the trustees don't have library email addresses,
No.
just as a point there.
Okay.
And
Well,
also...
if somebody isn't there, don't you have something on your website? If I want to communicate to the trustees, you've got to...
Right, and that actually gets distributed to all the trustees individually.
And so the procedure for responding, if there's a response in order?
If there is a desire to respond or a wish to respond, that's up to each trustee individually. And
Using their own devices? Okay.
Well, using their own email address. Yeah.
Okay. Well, be careful if you do that. Maybe you want to funnel your response through George. There's nothing illegal about it. It's just going to be cumbersome if somebody gives us a FOIA request and wants all communications relating to library business, whether they're on library equipment or personal equipment, then you may have to produce that. So be cautious about that.
A quick clarification. Perhaps you should explain what is library business and what isn't. So like scheduling a meeting is not library business, I don't think.
Well, that's an interesting question. The Public Access Counselor has not weighed in with an opinion. Let me back up. If there is a request for review, they call it a complaint. Technically the term is a request for review. Somebody submits a request for review claiming a FOIA we didn't produce documents, there was a FOIA violation because we didn't respond or didn't produce, or an OMA violation, Open Meetings Act violation. The Public Access Counselor then will examine what happened and then will issue an opinion. We did or did not violate the Open Meetings Act or FOIA. And if we did, then this is the remedial action that you need to take. You need to produce the records, or you need to go back and revisit the issue on the agenda, or whatever it happens to be. Or there was a violation of the Open Meetings Act because you had 3 trustees in a meeting talking about library business at the local coffee shop and it wasn't noticed and there was no minute on. So the Public Access Counselor issues opinions. The Public Access Counselor has not issued an opinion as to whether procedural issues versus substantive issues relating to the library, whether a multi-party communication about changing the meeting date or the meeting time, is that a violation of the Open Meetings Act? If all of the trustees, if there's a reply all email, George sends out an email, says, I propose that we have a special meeting on such and such, can you make it? And there's reply all come in. And so is that what the PAC would call a contemporaneous communication and quote a meeting end quote when you're all communicating with each other about your availability? The PAC has never rendered an opinion on that. In my view, that is not a violation of the Open Meeting Act because I think the intent is to avoid substantive discussions or discussions about substantive library business. This is a procedural nicety as to meetings and so forth. So I'm not concerned at all if the exchange of communications by 3 or more trustees is strictly limited to procedural issues. I can't quote chapter and verse and says yes, the PAC has issued an opinion or there's a case on this that says procedural business is different than substantive business. But I think it's, in my view, if and when that case ever comes along, the PAC and the courts would say this is a procedural issue, not a substantive issue, and it's not a violation.
In order to avoid any confusion though, should we just not reply all?
That's the easiest.
Like if George does that, if
Yep.
we're changing meeting times.
That's right.
Yes, that works for me, and just reply to George.
That's right. And oftentimes what you'll see is, oftentimes in bold letters, you get an email from George, at the bottom it says, "Do not reply all." I don't know if you do that, George.
I think once or twice I've done something.
But that's, yes,
We've been
that's,
trained on that one.
that's a good point, Jenny. That's, that's the easy way. Just stick to,
Right.
follow all the communications through George.
I have a question about our committees, because our committees are three-person committees. Does that mean that if two of the three committee members are meeting,
Having a one-on-one.
does that make a official meeting that would violate the Open Meetings Act?
Yes. It's got to be noticed, and an agenda, minutes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So yes, the term public body includes, specifically in the statute, in the Open Meetings Act, specifically includes committees.
And a FOIA request or I forget what you called it, for the Open Meetings Act violation, a person could request, an investigation into that without having a specific grievance?
Yes, they can, and then the Public Access Counselor would receive, the request for review or complaint is submitted to the Public Access Counselor. And then the Public Access, and we won't necessarily know, we might get a courtesy copy of it, but we might not know. The first inkling that we have that there was a request for review submitted is a letter from the Public Access Counselor that says, "We received a request for review from John Doe, and here's a copy, and we want you to provide us with the following information." So, at that point, and they don't have to explain anything other than in the request for review, they could make a claim. We think the Open Meetings Act was violated because there were, more than 2 trustees that were discussing library business at such and such locale, at the local coffee shop, or in the parking lot after the board meeting. Under the street light type of thing, everybody goes out to the parking lot, and all of a sudden, a citizen sees 3 trustees talking. We're talking about the upcoming Bears game, but they don't know, so what would happen is we'd respond, and, we might have to submit sworn statements from the 3 trustees who were talking in the parking lot that they were not talking about library business. And that would be the end of it, absent proof that there was, some discussion, some violation, because those 3 trustees were talking about library business. So,
I have a question about
Yeah.
emails.
Yeah.
If we are copying George, for example, on emails that are also going between multiple trustees, does that help with the FOIA stuff, since copies of those are all going to George?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, we could satisfy a request for those documents if it's clear on the face of the document that George was copied, and George produces all those papers. Yes, that would make our search
That's a good point.
substantially
Okay,
easier.
very good
So,
point.
yeah, we want to keep the director in the loop
Yep.
on this stuff. So, anyway, okay, let me just do a couple other things, and then we can figure out.
Just one more question.
Yeah.
What is the penalty if you're found to be in violation, right? Do we get fined? Do we are we asked to clean up our act, or?
Most of the time, especially for first-time offenses, they're going to slap you on the wrist and say, "This was a violation, don't do it again." One subject that comes up with some frequency has to do with discussions in closed session. Hypothetical. A request for review is submitted saying that the board went into closed session for the purpose of discussing acquisition of real estate. That's a subject that we can go into closed session for, okay? And I think that the discussion extended to a whole lot of other subjects other than the acquisition of real estate. It came, discussed possible filling of vacancy, discussed the director's performance, discussed another employee's performance, it discussed the financial conditions of the library. So I think they discuss things in open session that are not, in closed session that are not permitted. And so we would then have to submit to the PAC our closed session tapes. And if the PAC determined that there was improper discussion, they could order the release of that tape. And we may not want that out in the public. So that's one of the remedies that would be available for, let's say, releasing tapes, or let's say that they just determined that there was a defective a vote on a subject, that the vote, we thought that the vote was, that the motion passed and it didn't pass. They said you didn't have proper authorization to authorize the director to sign this contract because it was never properly voted on by the board. What they might say is, do over, put it on your next, fix the problem at your next meeting and make sure it's on the agenda and that there's a proper vote of the trustees. And that's another good example. We took action on a matter that wasn't on the agenda. That's a no-no. And so if somebody says, wait a second, they took a vote on something that was never on the agenda, and they can't do that. We can only take final action on items that are on the agenda. And they didn't do that. So PAC would say, yeah, that's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. You can only take final action on items that are on the agenda. Do it right, put it on there, and fix the problem. Ratify, if you will, the apparent decision that was made, so we can cure those things. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Final action, as long as we're talking about that, remember that the requirement for final action is that it has to be on the agenda. What about discussion items? So on the way to the meeting, Jenny thinks of something she wants to talk about, and it's not on the agenda. Can we talk about that? Absolutely. Can we discuss it for 2 hours? Absolutely. Can we vote on it? No. Why not? It's not on the agenda. So there's no prohibition about discussion of items, whether they're on the agenda or not. It's just we can't vote on it. So we have an exhaustive discussion on an item that's not on the agenda. We have to table any action on it until another meeting where it's on the agenda as an action item. Public comment. I'm sorry to say that I forgot to look at your public comment policy. You have one, I'm sure. But the reason I bring it up is that, you know, all meetings, public meetings, which includes committee meetings, are required to have an opportunity for public comment. We have the discretion to determine what the ground rules are. How many minutes, how much time in total we're going to devote to public comment, so that we're not here till midnight if there's a controversial issue and half the town shows up to comment. So we can set reasonable rules, and the PAC has issued opinions that support the proposition that, you know, a 3-minute time limit per person is reasonable. Could we say 10 minutes? Sure. If we said something less than 3, the PAC might have a problem with that. We know they've said 3 is okay. They haven't said 2 is okay. 2 minutes is okay. But the point is that we have to have an opportunity for public comment, but we can set the ground rules. And that includes committee meetings as well. So, closed session exceptions, you all know that there's a whole bunch of subject matters that we can go into closed session to talk about. I've attached the laundry list, if you will, of what those are. The fact that a subject is a little uncomfortable to talk about in an open session doesn't mean we can go into closed session. There's no closed session exception for comfort level. So if we can't find a specific pigeonhole on the list for closed session, it means we shouldn't be going into closed session to talk about it. So just be careful. When we go into closed session, I move that we go into closed session under section such and such. That's probably the way your procedures are, so that you've identified that subject. And we can't discuss in closed session any other subjects other than the one we've identified. But we can identify more than one. I move that we go into closed session for discussing the performance of a specific employee and for the acquisition of real estate under section such and such. We can go in for more than one purpose, but once we're in closed session, we have to stick to those. If we are in closed session and we decide that there's another subject that we want to talk about in closed session, but it wasn't in the motion to go into closed session, we got to come out of closed session, make another motion to go back in for the new subject matter.
But if
So,
that motion wasn't on the original agenda,
you know, it's okay. I'm glad you brought that up. May we go into closed session if it's not on the agenda? And the answer is yes. Why is that? Because we don't take final action in closed session anyway. So we are permitted, and the kind of the best practice is if we know there's going to be a closed session, put it on the agenda and put the subject matter on there. But even if it's not on the agenda, we still have the discretion to go into closed session, because after the closed session, we're not going to take any final action because there's no action item on there. So it's okay, even if there's nothing on there. So let's see what else I want to talk about.
I have one more question about that. Sorry, I might have missed something. So if we discuss the reason why we're in closed session in a closed session, then we come back out of closed session and that's when we vote on it?
If it's on the agenda for a vote. If there may be no action necessary, or you may say, George, we want you to put this on the next agenda as an action item.
Got it.
Subject matter you discussed in closed session. So, anyway, let me just see. I think my time is up. But I'm happy to stay as long as you like. If you want to talk about FOIA, you want to talk about finances, you want to talk about anything else. I don't want to, bore you to tears, and I don't want to delay your other agenda item considerations. So anyway, now that you have a face with a name, and
Right.
so
Are
an
there
opportunity
other
for
questions that board members have, or the other possibility is to invite you back again in a little bit?
Sure, whenever
Cover a
you-
different
yep,
topic, because we pretty much,
whenever you need me. I'll funnel your questions through George, and I'll get you an answer.
There you go.
okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Anyway,
Very
nice to see you all this evening.
Thank you, Roger.
I know you would love to have me stick around for the rest of your meeting, but I don't think you really.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, financial reports. Joe?
Help yourself to a cookie.
Good, thanks.
He's watching his weight.
No real change for last year. We're still floating probably around 40,000. We'll still add to library reserves. I've been working in the new software system. Yes. Finally, last weekend ran checks for the first time, so I've printed out about 8 check runs. There are a few extra steps in it, but anyway, you finally get there. So this week learning some of the other things, so eventually it'll be in place. And the report section looks good. It's just all the choices that are possible, so it'll take a little while to figure something out, but things workable and whatnot too, so, but anyway. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Joe. Item 9, President's Report. I really have nothing to report this evening. So we'll move on to item 10, good news. Comments from the board? Anybody with good news for us?
I would just like to thank George and the staff for the retreat. It was very well organized and very informative, and it just seems the library is really dedicated to doing a great job for the public.
Very good.
And I'd like to mention that very last minute, the staff and George pulled together some participation for Batavia Second Fridays this last Friday, and I think we did quite well. We handed out a lot of mini marks. There was some interest from folks walking past, a lot of interesting conversations, and I know that was tough to shoehorn in amongst everything else that you guys were working on. So hopefully we will have a little more advanced warning for next year if we want to participate or not. But I appreciate everybody working to make that happen, and especially George for taking time out of your evening to come and rep the library. It was really fun.
Enjoyed hanging out with
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Daniel.
Just because I know the Friends didn't meet, so it's not on the committee thing, but they had an amazing sale this month. They made like $1,400.
Wow.
Right.
At the July sale.
Yeah.
Everybody was coming in here.
They were
for $2
thinking-
heat.
They were thinking,
That was a
good. They were thinking Windmill Fest quite
Yeah,
good.
and heat, I'm telling you, nobody was on
Right,
the Fest.
right. So, thank you. It was good. Correspondence and communications. I do have 2 pieces of correspondence, one dated June 18th and one dated, or 2 dated July 12th. And they are both notices of annexation of territory. So you're welcome to see them after the meeting if you'd like.
In fact, every trustee.
Everybody.
Oh, you all got them? Okay. Directors and libraries reports.
Okay, the written report is in your packet, and the main point I would like to highlight this time is that I added the strategic plan objectives to the particular section on section goal E1, because we had rolled the Speak Up community engagement recommendations into the strategic plan. So I inserted all those in there and provided some updates on what we've been doing, so you can get a more complete picture of some of the things that are going on in that respect. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I know there's a lot of notes in there. In a dizzying array of colors. So either at the meeting or at any time, please feel free to ask the question. Otherwise, things are proceeding apace, and I'm sure that Stacy and Joanne have some interesting things that help us.
I do just have a quick comment on page A3.
Mm-hmm.
As I was reading through and taking note of some of the things that the referendum work sort of pushed off of the plates of our different staff members, I noticed that Joanne Zillman has a note in here about doing a lot of referendum work on personal time. I just want to say thank you for that. And I think it's important that we note as a board that we have staff members who are working beyond what we're paying them to do, which is something we need to consider.
I totally agree. Joanne attended every single one of the planning meetings for the referendum and was very instrumental in planning the Speak Up sessions.
I noticed that. I assumed that we were accommodating those hours within the rest of the schedule, and it appears we were not. So
We
that's...
find with all of our exempt employees, most of the managers and me and a few others around the libraries and librarians, we are considered salaried under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So the total number of hours we work is immaterial to the...
Irrelevant.
Yes, not immaterial, irrelevant. However, individual employees have the opportunity to compensate for that time by taking off time when possible. So.
That's appropriate. Okay.
Good.
You make a good point.
Thank you.
Joanne?
But also as a citizen of Batavia. I guess I feel like that was my role as a citizen as well, so. So just a couple highlights out of my report is that Summer Reading Club to date, we have more than 1,100 children signed up, checked in at least one reading level. And I will say that today was a very busy day. So I don't know if it was the downpour this morning and then the hot afternoon or what, but today was an extremely busy day. Logbooks are due by Monday, August 5th at 9 p.m. So there's still about 3 weeks left to collect remaining rewards and collections. So keep reading at home, and you have many more days to participate in Summer Reading Club. I I had some nice, Pat did some very pretty posters for me tonight and for programming, and I forgot I left them obviously on my desk downstairs. I'll send a few around when I come back up. I'll bring them back up again. We've had some great programs. This week we had something new, a Broadway jazz dance group from a local dance studio here. We've done set design. Jen Connon is doing our Readers Theater. The beginning of August, we're having both the Readers Theater and the Hicks Brothers Ukulele Band is playing at kind of a dual performance on August 1st. And so there have been a lot of great programs going on, a lot of very enthusiastic children. And I'll bring up those pictures because I know that means a lot too. And I just wanted to mention that the show on August 1st with our Readers Theater, they are across the hall right now practicing, and they'll be, Jen Connon has put together a little production from Sideways Stories from Wayside School. So if you're familiar with that book, it'll be a very cute little performance in front of the ukulele band. But I also wanted to take tonight an opportunity to do something that I don't do very often, but I'm going to invite Suzanne Skels up with me. You've read a few times about that we had a practicum student this summer, and Suzanne is our summer intern, our practicum student from Dominican University. Suzanne would not typically be here on a Tuesday night, but because of some scheduling changes tonight, she was coming in today, and I got the bright idea this afternoon, why don't I invite her up? Because then you get all a chance to meet her. Well, I didn't get a chance to give Suzanne that notice. So here she is. She kindly said she would love to come up. And I just wanted to introduce you to her. Suzanne began her practicum with us in May. She's the second practicum student we've had at Batavia during my tenure here. She spent a little time in both adult services, circulation, promotional services, and will be spending a little time in tech because she's not from a library background, right? She works at a bookstore in Anderson's in Naperville, but wanted to get a little taste of other departments. But she's spent most of her time in youth services. And we are very fortunate that she has, because she brought to our department a depth of knowledge in new and popular children's books. She is a cheerful customer service person. She's excited for programming, and she's been enthusiastic for outreach. She tackled every new experience with interest and passion. She handled the hustle and bustle of youth services during our busiest time of the year with a smile on her face. And in my mind, that's a good indication that Suzanne will make an excellent youth services librarian. Because, boy, if you can't make it through summer reading club, you should come downstairs. I'd like to thank Suzanne for all of her hard work in youth services this summer, and wish her best in her finishing and moving on in her library career.
Well, thank you, Joanne. It has been, I just need to say that it's been a fabulous experience. Joanne has made me feel very welcome, and everyone down in youth services has been supportive, and just, it's been a great experience. I've had a really good time. And I have 2 more weeks left. I'm sad that it's ending.
Well, welcome, Suzanne.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all of you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It truly has.
And that's all I have, unless somebody has questions.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Stacy?
Thank you. A couple of these items I mentioned last week at the board retreat, but I have a new one that's newly launched as well. First off, I'd like to talk about Canopy, which is a new streaming service available to our patrons. It offers more than 30,000 streaming films, and all a person needs to do is log in with their library card number and PIN, and they can start streaming these videos. They're available on all kinds of devices, so if people have smart TVs, they can stream to their TV, they can stream to a phone, an iPad, all manner of things. There's information on our e-media page on the library website. We can help at the reference desk. People can call us. We will walk them through the instructions, and it's pretty easy to use once it's set up. So we're really excited about that. Funding for this first year is provided by the per capita grant, and we're grateful for that too. Another new online resource, lynda.com, is now available for our patrons. This offers thousands upon thousands of instructional videos. Again, it requires a Batavia library card. It's available on our library website under Research a Topic. And a person just goes in and navigates to Linda and puts in their library card number. And there are so many topics I can hardly even begin to describe them. I encourage you all to take a look at it and just see what is available. It's possible for a person to complete an entire course and get a certificate of completion at the end, or you can dip in and just do the 7 minutes on this little thing about pivot tables that you always wanted to figure out and couldn't. So all kinds of good content there for lifelong learning. And finally, the new app launched today. So last week, Aaron Skog talked to us about the replacement for the Boopsy app, which we're going to be retiring. The new app, which is available wherever you download apps, put in Swan Libraries. You can download it. If anyone wants to do that yet tonight, see me after the meeting. I'll be glad to walk you through.
I already did it.
Fantastic. Oh, man.
I tried way too early.
Okay. It is now available. So it's pretty fun to use. So if you want a quick demo, I'd be glad to walk you through how it works. So we're really excited about that. Boopsy is going to be going away. We don't have a date yet for its disappearing from the scene, but we're really excited about what this new app is able to do. People can scan in their barcode. It will keep track of all of your checkouts, including your e-media downloads. You can go into your list of checkouts and pull up an ebook that you checked out, which I did earlier today, and it will push you right over to the relevant app. So it's really, it's more powerful than even I thought it was during testing as I was looking through the manual today. It's got some neat features. You can renew items, it's really fun. So again, Swan Libraries is the name of the app in the App Store or on Google Play. And pretty easy to set up, and if people have questions, we can help with the reference desk. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Stacy.
I wanted to conclude by mentioning that in September, we'll have a session, board education session by Webbit Services Incorporated and Ross Valentine, our electronic services coordinator. And then in October, we will have promotional services. Pat will be here. It turns out that our graphic designer, who was actually the person that triggered the idea, I think originally, works, he has a commitment actually, he's not working here, he has a commitment every Tuesday night. And so we, unless something should happen with that commitment on the correct Tuesday night, we probably are not going to be able to get it.
Okay.
So I apologize for that. So those of you who want to meet him, come on in and I'll introduce you to him. So
I'll
thank you.
just go down there someday. Okay, thank you, George. All right, item 13, committee and official representative reports. There was no facilities meeting, no finance meeting, no outreach meeting. There was a services meeting. The entire meeting was in closed session. And so basically we did approve the salary schedule for this year.
But not in closed session.
We did not approve that in closed session.
No, I was
Right.
like, we screwed something up.
Yeah. So, anything to add?
No, I think it was a good discussion. I think the discussions we've had in the past in closed sessions at the previous board meeting helped to keep the conversation very concise and to the point. I know Lisa, the HR manager, and George did a lot of work to revise the salary schedule, work through the numbers. It's a big deal this first year of getting compliant, and we're making some changes, but I think we came to the conclusion of the right changes that we needed to make. The first few drafts needed some revisions, and they went back and made them, and it seemed like that work paid off.
It was a very productive meeting. Yeah. It really was. So, got a lot of work done, a lot of new understandings,
Right.
and we feel comfortable with the new schedule. Okay, Batavia Access Television.
Oh, and can I add one more thing?
Yes,
Sorry.
you may.
The before you go on. The new revised schedule is still within the budgeted amount that we've already approved as a board within the budget. It's actually under
Quite a
what?
bit.
Quite a bit under what
Less,
the
right?
first revision was, or the first draft was. And that had anything to do with our discussions, but we did want to make note that it's still within budget and still actually lower than the
Yeah,
budget.
so the salary changes were all yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess just for discussion purposes, a lot of the changes were brought about because of the passing of the minimum wage act in Illinois. And so we really had to rethink things pretty carefully. All right, Batavia Access TV, Pat Leonard, I think she included
There is
a report on the salmon colored paper. Anybody have any comments or questions on that report? Okay. Future agenda items, number 14. Looks like we have quite a lot of work in progress going on in July and August, which is a good thing. It means we're moving forward. Any comments or discussion on that? Okay, so then we move on to item 15, which is a closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body as authorized by
That section.
That section, right.
Is done.
5 ILCS 120/2C1. So we are in compliance. According to what we just heard from Roger this
And
evening.
we always put that statement in minutes as well.
So we need a motion to go into closed session
I move to go into closed session.
and a second. So we will, all in favor?
Aye.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call vote,
Who
okay.
did this?
I did.
Blodgett,
Aye.
Colada,
Aye.
Garrett,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
McKenzie, Russo, I, Smith.
Aye. So we will go into closed session at 7:48.